managing working capital is a huge part that I think people don't understand. It's the biggest downfall. That's why companies don't exist. Um, they they go out of business. If you look at the SBA, they talk about how many small businesses fail. I will tell you that working capital is probably the biggest thing that kills people. They just don't really understand how much cash they have to operate the business.
Hey there, I am Dr. Jason Ballara, and this is the Know Your Why podcast, where we explore the why behind success. Every week, I meet with real estate investors, veterinary entrepreneurs, mindset coaches, authors, and fitness professionals to uncover their why and how it drives them on the winding road to success. What is your why? Hi everyone, I'm Jason Ballara. This is the Know Your Why podcast. Today I'm here with James Harhi. James is a strategic, forward-thinking, and entrepreneurial executive with 20 plus years of experience leading operational strategy, financial planning and analysis, product management, and M&A. James, your bio is super interesting. I'm excited to really hear everything about what you do here. But I just want to start by saying thank you. Thank you for coming on the show today. Thank you for taking out the time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for the invite. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, me too. Can you just start with your story, your background, kind of what brought you into business, and then we'll kind of dive in from there.
Yeah, it's interesting. It all started probably when I was 12 years old, and I came from a first generation. My mother came over from Cuba as a small child. When Fidel took power, her family sent her and her sister on a plane to Miami to live with relatives she'd never even met before. And so we, had to rebuild, started from scratch down in Miami. My mother moved up to a little bit north in the Treasure Coast area. That's where I grew up my life. And about 12 years old, we were living below the poverty line. I joke, I said, with my wife sometimes when we talk about the risk we take, and I say, well, hey, I've eaten government cheese and government peanut butter. It can't get much worse. We've got, it's not, if we make a bad deal, life will go on. And so at 12 years old, my mom came to me and said, hey, you're going into middle school. If you want, money to buy clothes. I was the oldest of six. And being the oldest, all my brothers wore my hand-me-downs, but I always had to have the new clothes. And she said, "We want you to work this summer so you can buy some clothes for your middle school." So I went and got a job with my stepfather's family owned a roofing company. So 12 years old, I went out and I learned how to tear roofs off of buildings in Florida and put them back on, and did that for 6 8 weeks, and then took the money and went to Sears at the time and bought my school clothes, and that was pretty much going to make it until I got to Christmas, and then Christmas would be my next allotment of clothes at that point. And but it started off there with the family run roofing company. My family then branched out and started doing floor cleaning for a company drugstore called Eckerd's. So we were the big, we did that for them. Some on nights and weekends, I would work, mostly overnights. We would work and clean floors, off the floors, clean the floors for different drugstores and an auto parts store. So I've got a real understanding of entrepreneurship and understanding taking pride in something that you own. Ended up going to University of Central Florida in Orlando. Enjoyed that school because it was relatively young. It was founded in 1963, so it was only 40 years old or 30 years old at the time, and got the opportunity to help build that university and see, grow tradition and grow stuff at that point. Then graduated from college, ended up working for Disney World for a little while, about 6 years. Started off as a lifeguard, worked my way into middle management. 9/11 happened, and I decided I saw this huge flattening of the organizational chart, and I said, "Well, where is this going to lead me in the next 5 years?" As everything just gotten flattened out, and the positions that were my next career jump were all gone. And I decided I went back to Disney, and I said, "Hey, I want to move to a different department." I was in what we called recreation. and there wasn't a hotel GM or vice president in a company that ever came from recreation. They always came from rooms, they came from parks, they came from housekeeping, they came from all the retail. Nobody came from recreation. So I said, you know what, I need to move. Disney told me, nope, we really like you where you are. You're really valuable to us. You've really done great things, but we want you to stay where you are. And that was kind of the end of the conversation. And there was no timeline to it. It was just kind of like, hey, we want you to stay here. So at that time, a friend of mine from college, his parents were selling a military manufacturing plant in Melbourne, Florida, which I knew the area. And so I went from being a business development manager to saying, you know what, I'm going to go do military electronics. So I went to this little shop in Melbourne. They had 13 to 15 employees, did about $1 million in revenue, and it was just mom and pop. And worked there for a couple of years, learned the business, developed that business from up to $4 million in gross revenue and 50 employees. I had an opportunity to sell it to somebody higher on the food chain that wanted to get it, add that vertical. So I sold it, and during that time, Disney came back to me and said, "Hey, we want you to come back and be a vendor for us." So I kept that vendor business with them. I've been running the Disney arcades, maintenance operation for 20 years now, and was semi-retired. My youngest was born, and I was semi-retired. My wife, and we spent a lot of time with our annual pass at Disney and having fun with the kids, and then just had that burning desire to go build something else. So then we started two more companies up, a management company for amusement parks, and then a lifeguard training company, and took those companies pretty much from zero to one over $1 million, one over $3 million in sales in about 5 years, and continue to do that. And then we look at additional opportunities now. My model primarily is somebody asked at a party the other day, like, what do you do for a living? I have no idea what you do. I just know you travel a lot, and I know your wife, and what do you do? A neighbor was like, and I said, my primary job is I fix problems. I go to people and I say, okay, you have a problem, I fixed it. It doesn't matter if it's manufacturing, if it's service, if it's training, IT, we can do I can figure out anything. So I have a very good skill set to be able to take problems, simplify them, explain to employees, set up processes, and then be able to walk away and then just check into it. So I primarily try to hire business unit leaders who will run those companies. So that allows me the opportunity to have 6 or 7 companies functioning all at one time and not have to be involved in the day-to-day, just supporting my business unit leaders and trying to think strategically about the future and then what other opportunities might have.
Yeah, that's amazing. I mean, the backstory is sort of inspiring, I think, for people that come from humble beginnings, that you just need to put in the work and you can grow and sort of get to a place of semi-retirement at a young age. But also, I mean, we'll talk about all that. Also the growing companies, maybe even probably not completely unrelated, but sort of not all within the same exact vertical in terms of the service or products provided. So let me just sort of go back to sort of your growing up and went to college and all of this. I mean, you talked about your humble beginnings and sort of government peanut butter and things like that. I understand that concept. There's a lot of times where I do think it's like, well, can't be worse than sort of the way I have lived. So it's kind of like you hit a hard time. Maybe that helps prepare you for it. But then you went on to college, and I guess the process as you were going, you talked very sort of matter of fact about it. I can't imagine that it was like quite as easy as of a sort of stepping stones, as you mentioned, but all of those pieces along the way, I would imagine, helped contribute to, sort of where you are today, and sort of what your uh, career entrepreneurial path has become.
Yeah, I
Do
mean, I try to explain to my kids, they'll never really understand it, but when I was a kid in elementary school, I was the only Hispanic kid in the school. And that's crazy when you think about it nowadays, when you look around our demographics of our country. But at that time in our market, in Fort Pierce and Port St. Lucie, there was in elementary school, I was the only one. And I was kind of this outcast, unusual kid because it was a heavily segregated area. It was actually a forced segregation. They were busing fam, different races from different parts of town to make sure that because they had, at that time, there was two rural cities in the county, and Fort Pierce was primarily African American. Port St. Lucie is primarily white, and they were forced busing kids back and forth between the schools to try to get the percentages to the right level. And then I was this unusual brown kid in the class, and there were a lot of fights on the playground because of I didn't have a group. I was by myself a lot of times, and but that brought a certain resilience to me as I grew up to really understand I got to be a fighter. And I learned, you know, luckily I learned by the time I got to sixth or seventh grade, physical fighting wasn't necessarily the right answer. It was more, mental fighting and mental preparation, and I had to be smarter than everybody else, and find ways. But I was also able to learn how to build constituents and build partners and not have to be the outsider at that point. So it helped me on that part. And then being the oldest, at probably 10 years old, and I had my youngest sibling is 10 years younger than me. When she was born, I was pretty much the babysitter when I came home from school. So I was do homework, babysit, cook dinner, get everything ready because the parents were working or going out to work at that point. And I learned how to manage five siblings pretty quickly to make sure that it wasn't that we all were progressing at that point. And the interesting part is, of the five siblings I have, one is in property and real estate. He's an entrepreneur in real estate. One is a entrepreneur in welding. He's a welding welder, owns his own company doing that. Another one's a real high level salesperson in the medical field. And then my other brother is in Utah, and he does really well on developing stuff. He's more family centric. And then my youngest sister has a PhD and is in a disability education, and she has a PhD there. And it's kind of an interesting group that the six of us, you would never. The odds were against us, but we all and it had a great family upbringing, and we were kind of a Brady Bunch family. We were divorced, have no true brother. I have one half brother, two half sisters, and two stepbrothers. We were right in that Brady Bunch kind of thing where there was three of us, two of us, and then one half sibling for all of us that we shared. So it was an interesting combination. But we did really well, and it was primarily understanding diversity and understanding how to and my parents really drove us to, hey, you're going to go to college. Even growing up, my parents had a rule that we couldn't get our driver's license. We were Eagle Scouts. So we all the boys became Eagle Scouts so that we could get our driver's license. And so there was a lot of hard work, but reward kind of tied to them in the process.
Yeah. And I think that's obviously a successful family, successful siblings. Your parents did a lot right. That's in instilling that work ethic. I know I've done roofs. I know what being on a roof in the summer is like. I'm sure in Florida it's even worse. I was up in New England, so it's I know how hot that can be. That's hard work, but it just again, all of that kind of teaches you, sets you up for success, kind of down the line. When you were, so you were at Disney, and then that the company came, you bought the company, right? That the electronics company came up for sale, and you bought it at that point.
Yeah, I joke it was 2007. I think it was 2006, 2007, and I joked that it was at the time when the banks were just throwing money out the window. Um, and I literally got $1 million loan with $50,000 that I had saved up, and 5% down kind of loan. And you don't see that kind of, you never, I haven't seen those kind of offers before again since the 2007 area. So I got very lucky on the timing part of that. But yeah, um, we just, when we moved to Melbourne, my wife and I were just like, okay, we're gonna live in a 1 bedroom apartment. We're gonna save all of our money. We got to get this money saved up. I worked with a group here in Orlando called Prospera, and they helped me find the right bank. At the time, it was CIT. They helped, come up with a loan and helped me with the business plan and helped me with all that. They're a nonprofit that work with small business owners here in Orlando, and they did a great job of helping me understand that. And it was, a little bit of luck, but it was a lot of hard work. I mean, the funny part was I bought the company, and then we started the Iraqi invasion. There was an Iraqi invasion in 2009, 2010, somewhere in that range, where we started another, an invasion there. And then I made so much money that first year. I mean, it was because the government turned around and said, okay, we need all this SATCOM, because we worked with Harris Corporation in Melbourne, and we need all the SATCOM for for this. And we built up a huge amount of stuff. And I made all this money, and then I turned around and I looked at all my employees, and I said, well, I've got all these employees, and the work kind of just shut off because all the money then went to different types of things. All the communication equipment was bought. And I just expected it to be, okay, this is going to be, every year is going to just be like this. This is going to be awesome. And I kept my payroll at that same level, even though we probably had 10% of the work for like 6 months, and realized that there was no call. The phone wasn't ringing at that point, and almost bankrupted the company. And ended up having to do a layoff, which I fired a lot of people in my life, but layoffs I always have a really hard time with, because I feel like at that point I failed my employees. If we've gotten to a layoff point, then I feel like I failed you. If I fire you because you're an idiot, you don't show up to work, you stole from me, and you did something really stupid, I have no problem firing you on that. I can go to bed the next night and I'm like, hey, you caused that problem for yourself. I didn't do that to you. Um, I always tell my employees, if I fire you and you don't know that it's coming, I failed you as a manager. So that's kind of our strategy is, but whenever I have to do a layoff, I had to do a massive layoff in Melbourne. Um, and I remember not sleeping and trying to figure it out, and really worried that it was going to hit bottom, and was able to cut costs. I had to lay off a great production manager at that time, and I had to become the production manager and the CEO and the accounting person, and I did all the jobs to keep it going, and we kept it going. And then we hit the next October fiscal year, and we started getting orders again on other projects and stuff like that. It was able to recover and build back up from there. But it was definitely a learning process and a learning curve that, as an owner, I had to understand to right size my staffing based on the business demand, and not just keep expecting that to come in. And in that market, it was really weird because you really couldn't do a whole lot of sales and marketing. We were at the whim of Lockheed Martin, Harris. If they got contracts, yeah, we would get work. If they didn't, they get contracts. But I had no sales channel. I was just picking up the phone and saying, okay, yeah, you need 1,000 cables. Okay, I'll build you 1,000 cables. You need this, I'll build you that. And um, we were very dependent on other things. So that was another reason I didn't like that business model. There wasn't a lot of control on my part, and then it was very capital intensive. We would get $1 million order, and it would be 60-70% material cost. And sometimes the building time would be 3-4 months. I would have to carry that working capital cost a lot of times. Sometimes they would give us some money, some progress payments, things like that. But they were getting away from progress payments. They wanted us to just deliver and get paid. I did get them to do better terms, more efficient terms, but it was still like there was a huge working capital carrying, which is another thing. I was joking with somebody about this the other day. We were talking about small business, and I said working capital was probably the other largest learning curve I learned in owning companies. Is that you look at your P&L and you're like, okay, man, I made all this money, and then you're like, but where's the cash in the account? The IRS says they want a check, and because I said I made $300,000, but that $300,000 is now working capital to go build the next thing or do the, byproduct, payroll, etc. At that point, in managing working capital is a huge part that I think people don't understand. It's the biggest downfall. That's why companies don't exist. They go out of business. If you look at the SBA, they talk about how many small businesses fail. I will tell you that working capital is probably the biggest thing that kills people. They just don't really understand how much cash they have to operate the business.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I mean, I think it's probably a lesson. People that make it, it's probably a lesson learned oftentimes the hard way, like you did. Mm-hmm. That hey, we really do need some cash in the bank. We need to have something to, because it's not always going to be in any business. It's not always going to be sort of a linear upward progression of increase in revenue. It's not going to happen. So you have to be understand that there's going to be some ups and downs, whether it's seasonal or if it's contract work or whatever the case may be. You have those challenges, and so that's a valid reason, I think, very valid reason for maybe not liking that business. But then you went on to purchase other businesses or start other businesses. So maybe you could talk about how you, at this point, with the experience that you have, like what's your kind of ideal way to either start or acquire a business and sort of grow from there?
I think, well, one of the lessons I learned very early at Disney was you've got to have passion in what you do. And one of the things I tell my employees as well is that when they talk about their job and we do performance reviews, things like that, I always tell them, I said, make sure you love what you do. And if you don't love what you do, if you don't wake up in the morning excited about it, I tell them, go find another job. And I said, I won't take it personal. Just go find another job. I said, you spend more time. The two things you spend the most time doing in life are working and sleeping. That's the honest truth. So I always tell them, find a job you like and buy a good mattress, because that's the key to happiness. Because, I see my kids, maybe 2 hours a day, maybe 3 if I'm lucky. In reality, I'll see them before they go to school and a little bit afterwards. And then, sometimes on the weekends, if they're not in activities or anything else like that. But I see my employees a good solid 40, 50 hours a week, and so I better like all the people I work with at that point. And so what I look at from my angle is I look at working capital, from my end where I'm not, I want to be careful about it. I look at working capital. The other thing I tell people is, I had a cousin who wanted to she wanted to stop being a doctor and become a baker. And I had to sit down with her and kind of like, okay, let's run through the math real quick. Okay, how much do you make per cake? Okay, what's your real profit on how many cakes you make? Okay, all right, and then how much money do you make a day? Okay, all right, can you sell 42 cakes a day? No, you cannot. You're not by yourself. And so I think you have to look at things that, one, you're very excited about it. You're excited about the opportunity, but you also have to make sure the cash flow works. And I think you also have to be, especially as small business owners, it has to be something you're knowledgeable about. You want to be able to get involved in, and because it takes a while to get to the point where you can step back and not have to be a hands-on owner. There's very little, I always, another joke I have with the employees and my friends is that I've never had more bosses I've had until I became a small business owner. Because realistically, my employees are my boss because they're important to me. I've got to keep them happy. I can't. I'm not the type of person where I'm just like, okay, we'll just rinse and repeat. I want loyal, good employees. So they're my customers in a sense. And then I've got vendors who I've got to work with, whether it's on getting me product on time, giving me flexible terms. I've got to have good relationships with them. Then I have my customers um, that I'm selling to that have to be good. So, you know, you think, okay, so I'm the owner, life's great. I don't have to answer to anybody. If anything, the small business owner, I got to answer to everybody. I don't answer to nobody. I answer to everybody is kind of how I look at it. And that patience is uh, something that you got to have if you don't have it as a small business owner. And if all this other stuff is causing stress, that's just going to be one more piece of it. So I think from when I look at trying to acquire a new business, the key pieces I look at are one, um, what's the margins on it? What's the return on it? And what the asking price is. For a while now, it's been really difficult to buy businesses because, the multiples have been out of whack. And then, especially in our market, in the amusement world, it's been difficult because I call it the sugar rush to 21, 22, where the consumer spending was just out the window. You couldn't explain why people were, your per cap, your average spending on food was double what it was in 2019. And it wasn't just inflation. People were just spending money, whether it was the free government money, whatever it was. It's hard to then, some of the parks had their best years ever. And then people turn around and they said, they're like, oh, no, now it's time to sell. And we want to sell in the last 2 years, an 8 times multiple on that. You're like, when you're deep down in your heart that that's not the honest answer, is that the last 2 years are not going to be repeatable. So there's been kind of a stagnant piece of that. I think there are opportunities coming, even though capital has gotten very tight. I think there's opportunities coming. I've talked to a few people. I think there is some opportunities, and the problem right now in this market is that young people have no capital. I mean, they have some of the smallest amounts of capital that we've ever seen, and the boomers have tons of assets but don't know how to liquidate them, and they want to retire. And then you've got the people kind of my group who are like, okay, but we're outnumbered by the boomers. We're outnumbered by the boomers, and the young people don't have the cash to buy the company. So I think there's going to be some interesting opportunities in the next 5 years of being able to get really good multiples in that marketplace to go out and buy. And it could be a combination. It could be simple things like small little shops. It could be consulting shops. It could be accounting firms. It's going to be all over the place. But it's going to be a buyer's market in the next 5 years, as long as we can figure out interest rates the normal level in that time period.
So we I guess we have similar projections and problems in real estate, where it's the past few years have been so out of whack for what's normal, both sort of, I guess you could look at it as good and bad, depending on which side you're on. But the fact is, you have to pivot and adjust and kind of go with whatever the times present and what that means for opportunities. In the meantime, as far as sort of growth within your existing businesses, what strategies do you use? I know you mentioned that first business marketing wasn't really a much of an option. So I mean, how do you like to work to grow your businesses?
We've been primarily more on the startup side. We've done M&A, we've done startups and then M&A to help grow the market share. We've done that. But what I look for is what's broken in the market, and that's how we got into like the lifeguard business. We looked at the lifeguard business, lifeguard training, and there are primarily two companies. There was American Red Cross, who's a big, almost like government style company where it's, and it's kind of an interesting business model. And then there was another company, Ellis, who was more of the private, and they had gone to both extremes, both extremes of the market, and there was nothing down the middle of the path. So we said, you know what, people are kind of upset that they want a middle path, and we were able to develop a product that was more centric style, and that resonated very well. within the industry for us. And then even on the management side, we looked at opportunities where there were people, investors who would go out and buy a water park in town, and they were lawyers, doctors, et cetera, banks. They'd buy a water park and then they'd have no idea what they're doing. They put their nephew in charge of it and it wouldn't make any money. So we looked at that market as saying, okay, there are banks and high net wealth individuals who buy these assets thinking they're going to be easy, and then they realize they're not. So we come in and help them out with that. I think the part that we look at the most is really we want to find markets that are underserved. That's our strategy. We don't have the resources to go against the big boys and try to take them down, but we do a great job of getting customer affinity. Our customer loyalty is very high because it doesn't matter if I have to lose, if we do something wrong, we're going to make it right. It doesn't matter if we're going to lose money on it. It doesn't matter what's going to happen. We're going to make it right. And our customers understand that and they appreciate that. And they know that we're always going to stand behind whatever we say. If we give them a price and it's really bad, we'll deal with it. And we'll suck it up and we'll make it. We're not the people that come back and say, oh, we're gonna have to double the price for half of the project because we messed up. And we also know that we're not egotistical in the sense to tell people like we listen to our customers, we listen to our employees and say, okay, is there a right way to do this? It's not about the ego of our leadership and stuff like that. We don't look at, if you look at my companies, there's not any high ego people. It's all more servant. We call it more servant leadership kind of concept. And that has resonated well with our employees and it's given us great employee loyalty. Before COVID, I probably had maybe 2 or 3 employees leave a year, 100 or so. And they were primarily people that I encouraged to leave because they needed opportunities. And, the hardest part of the company sometimes also is you have these pyramid organizational charts, especially small business, where you got an owner, you got a VP, you got maybe a manager, and you got a lot of hourly employees underneath them, and they don't have opportunities to move up. So what we try to do is help them find opportunities outside of our company. And then what we find is they become great customers or great vendors or great other, we have that relationship with them already, and they become great customers, they become great vendors, and we watch their career grow. And you never know, our VP may leave, and that's the opportunity to come bring them back into the fold at that point. Now that they have more experience, they can bring us back new thoughts and strategies at that point.
Yeah, I love that concept. I mean, it ultimately, business is about people, right? It's you leverage technology and systems and all of that, but ultimately at the end of the day, it's about people and treating people right within your businesses. I love the example of kind of helping find them opportunities even outside of the company that can help let them grow, and then maybe they come back with bigger at a higher level, I guess, in their progression that can help your business in turn. So I think it's always thinking about those relationships and just not at that moment, right? It's like this is building these relationships with people kind of for the long term, however it turns out. And I think that's a very smart way to just kind of always be building for the future and building goodwill with the folks that you work with or they work for you, in whatever capacity. So I think that's phenomenal. James, I want to get to switch gears here so I can ask you the questions I ask every guest. The first one is based on the name of the show being Know Your Why. What's your why? You've been very successful. You started, kind of making things happen at a young age and continued. You had a point at which you were semi-retired, but seems like maybe that's doesn't suit you. But what is your why? What's driving you at this point?
Yeah, I really like seeing things improve. One of our key values within all of our companies is we call it evolve. And the comment that I tell my employees is that if we don't improve today, we'll be gone tomorrow. And I always tell them that. I said, every day we come in and we've got to be a little bit better. Let's find a process that does it. And I really get value out of that. I get my joy. I get more joy out of seeing my employees evolve, my companies evolve, our customer reviews improve. I get more value out of that than anything I'll ever get out financially out of the company, to be honest. And um, there's been many times, I joke, I probably could have retired again already if I was probably a little more cutthroat, a little more uh, greedy. But I really don't. That's not the part that drives me. The checking account doesn't drive me. We look at things and we say, I want it to sustain, I want it to survive, and I want it to be. I want my employees to be able to, move on, and my customers really appreciate that we solve problems and we do things, and that's where I get my joy when I see like, hey, this is going on, and I see how we built things. That gives me the happiness. The checkbook doesn't. The check, don't get me wrong, we're not struggling by any means, but we're also, there's been many times in the year where I'm not the highest paid employee in the company, and I don't have, that's what drives, that's not what drives me. It's like, hey, if you do a really good job and I gave you a bonus commission and you kicked it out of the park, you may make more money than I do this year, and that's fine. Now, I have equity and I have other things, and I'll make my money on selling the company in the future. That's how I look at the financial part of it. But um, there's been a lot of times where it's just like, hey, we need to do this, and that's what it is. But the thing that drives me every morning, gets me up in the morning, is seeing the improvements and being able to solve problems for my customers, my employees, my guests, and make better experiences.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's it's fun, right? It's kind of. I
That's
mean,
the other thing I joke is I make money doing fun. I make money having fun. I
yeah,
mean, and that's the great thing about the industry. It's kind of driven me back. If I never would have thought in the amusement side that I would be, when I became a lifeguard at 20 years old, that I'd still be doing this in my late 40s. That I'd still be around lifeguards and stuff like that.
yeah,
I've gone past the point now where I tell people, all right, I was a lifeguard in 1996. Raise your hand if you were alive. I can't do that anymore.
yeah.
you know, there's no more lifeguards. Now they're much old. They're like 96. I don't even. I think my parents might have been born in 96. But
Right.
it's crazy. But it's a fun thing. I go to I get to go to a lot of water parks and amusement parks, and I get to ride rides. And anytime we acquire a park, I bring my bathing suit and I go on every single ride. I want to know what's good and bad about it. If it's operating right, I'm the first one to go. Last week I'm working on a project in Punta Cana, and we're getting ready to open a water park down there. I'm working with a great owner down there, and he wanted to have a big bang event for his grand opening. Water park's a little bit delayed, but we brought in Elton John. So Friday night, I was sitting in the fifth row, watching Elton John perform with a friend of mine, and it was just an amazing experience. And honestly, I was pretty getting paid to do that. I mean, that's what I was doing. Now there was a lot of 12, 14-hour days leading up to that event, and but it was it was all for the end. It was all for fun. You know.
Yeah, yeah. That's pretty good. Pretty good end to a project, I guess. That you get to get to see Elton John in concert. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Uh, Tell us something about yourself that isn't common knowledge, special skill, a hobby, something to let the listeners know you better. Just anything you're comfortable sharing.
I am a introvert, which is weird. I hate cocktail parties. Cocktail parties and networking sessions are the death of me. And I I am emotionally exhausted when I have to finish one. And I do a lot of volunteer work and boards and stuff like that. And even yesterday, I was at a Hispanic Heritage Scholarship thing, and I sat in the corner during the networking thing, and I just worked on my phone and did phone calls until the networking was done, and then I kind of slid into the lunch reception, and then I talked to everybody at the lunch at the table we were at. But I really hate that, and people will think like, wait a minute, you're out here, you're running around. I can get in front of a convention with 10,000 people in it and give a presentation and not have one inch, like, it's just like I'm waking up in the morning and putting my socks on. No big deal. But you put me in a networking or a cocktail thing, or I have to go meet new people, and I'm miserable. I'm just absolutely miserable. And it's a weird dynamic. People really are surprised when they tell them that. They're like, wait a minute, you're talkative, you're always having a good time. And with my close friends and people I'm good with, I'm easygoing and I can have a great time, but I can open up. But in a random thing where I just don't really know what to do with people, and I really have I'm horrible at small talk. That's the honest answer.
I can relate to that very much. The networking events just kill me. It's really, I try as I might, it's not something that I just can get comfortable with. But it's I guess it's part of the job. That's the maybe the less fun part of the job.
The way I look at it is I understand my weaknesses and I just hire people to do that for me. So I hire people to go to the networking, go to the trade shows, go to the stuff, and I hire people that are really good at that. And I understand my weaknesses, and I say, okay, I'm never going to be a salesperson, but I can, when like I have a customer who's been with us for a while and I get a relationship with them, getting the customer, the first part's the hard time, but once we get them in the door, we're best friends. I can sit and talk with them for hours, no big deal. But I just have to know my weaknesses and hire around it. One of the things that, when I worked at Disney, we talked a lot about diversity, and I always tell my employees is that diversity isn't skin color, it's not race, gender, ethnicity, religion. I don't look at diversity. Yes, that's all part of it, but that's not where it ends. And I said we always need to be looking at our teams from a diverse piece, and not and we need to look at our teams and our strengths and our weaknesses, and look at, yes, we need a female voice on the team. We need a female leader. We need different, ethnicities, we need different races in there. And we not to look at things in a one way, but we also need to look at it in the angle of, okay, we need a really organized person. We need a worker. We need a person who's going to push us to have fun, to push us to not just work all day. We need that personality on the team, and we look at it, and it, and that's kind of how I look at diversity, a little bit differently than most people. But we try to have a diverse team, and have different groups in there. But primarily, for what we see is, and that's what I think diversity was really meant to be. But it's hard for people to understand that, so we just made it into um, simplification of it. But we have to look at how we do everything on that part. So
Yeah, it's a great point. I don't think I've ever heard that before, but I do think it's actually probably, people talk about having complementary strengths and things like that, but I think just a diversity of personality types within a company as well is I think actually tremendously important. And you don't want to have you don't want to have a company with all introverts, because then there's probably not much in the way of sales and marketing. And
yep.
you don't want to have a company of all visionaries, because now you don't have those kind of integrators and implementers and things like that. So it's truly a piece. Certainly don't leave out the other components of diversity, but yeah, that's an important consideration to bring in as well. I like the idea behind that. James, when people hear this and they want to reach out to you, what's the best way?
The easiest, LinkedIn is, I'm on LinkedIn as well. And then, my email address, I think, is attached here as well. I'm on my email constantly. But if you want to learn more about me, LinkedIn has some information about the history of myself and areas and things like that. I think, we're always looking for talent. We're always looking for opportunities. We have a very open concept of what deals look like. That's the other great thing, is when you're in small business, the great thing about small business is that every deal can be unique. It doesn't have to be boiler template like corporations when they look at M&A. We look at things very uniquely, in the sense of, I've got majority of the companies I'm majority owner, but I also have a couple companies where I'm 10, 20% owner. And I say that because they want to be the person, and I'm just going to support them and develop relationships and help them understand how to build their company and do that part of it. And so everything is unique. I enjoy talking to people. Really enjoy this time, Jason. It's been a great opportunity for me to pull to talk about myself. And like I said, I'm not a great marketer myself and everything else. So this is a great opportunity for me to do this. And then but that's the easiest way to get a hold of me. And I'm very open and honest. I have people that bump into me and they say, "Hey, I want to go buy a company. I want to do this." And I will sit down with them for a couple hours free of charge and just say, "Hey, talk through like I did with my cousin about baking cakes. Okay, this is going to work or it's not going to work, or here's your SWOT analysis real quick. These are the things you got to be worried about. Good luck if you want to do it. If you want to hire me as a consultant in the process, I'm willing to do that as well. This is what the deal kind of looks like for me to do that." But I also get joy out of watching them grow and just keep in touch and do things like that. And let's see how we can grow your business and what opportunities there are.
Fantastic. I feel like you sort of just answered this question, but generally I end with what piece of advice would you give to someone who wants to get started in business? They hear this, they're inspired, they want to follow in your footsteps, and I feel like you put a little bit of that in there. But I'll give you the opportunity to expand, I guess.
My biggest advice is talk to a lot of people, and because like when I even did my first one, I went to SCORE, which is a government group that does retired executives that do stuff, and it was it's SBA, part of the SBA, I believe. And I went to SCORE and I sat down with a retired executive, and he showed him off my financials, and it was free of charge. And we sat there and we went through the whole thing. We went through the thing. Prospera, which is a group that works here in Florida, I think they're also in the Carolinas and Georgia now. They work primarily with Hispanic groups, and do stuff in Spanish as well for people that have English as a second language. They will do free of charge type of things. So there's opportunities out there, whether through the SBA, through nonprofits that will sit down and review everything with you, because it's a lot harder than you think it is. And talking to people will help you really come up with a great game plan. Don't do it in a vacuum is probably the biggest piece of advice I can give somebody. Is really, when you do it in a vacuum, there's so many mistakes. I've made them. Even talking to people, I've made my own mistakes. But I try to give back, on that part. I've been a board member of Prospera. I'm financially contributor to them. I do that with UCF as well. University of Central Florida. I do a lot. I'm on the foundation board for them, and primarily focusing on helping students, entrepreneurial students that want to come up and grow up in the industry and become business owners. But that's the biggest thing, is talk to a lot of people. It takes a village to start a small business, but be careful too, because there are some people out there that will, charge you money for nothing, talk to the nonprofits, talk to the government agencies as your primary focus. Be careful. There are some people out there that try to take advantage of people. I've seen it happen before to other people, and I get tons of emails, spam phone calls of people trying to sell me stuff that is completely illegitimate. And but then once again, you talk to people and you find out, like, I get phone calls all the time, like, "Hey, I got this in the mail. What the heck is this?" And I'm like, "It's a spam. It's a scam. Delete it. Get rid of it. Don't do it," because they make it sound very official. The envelopes look very official, especially when you start a company. When you start your first company, you organize, you're going to get so much junk mail in the first 90 days of everybody in the world. Buy this, buy this, buy this, buy that. Still there?
Yep, no, you were muted for just a second there, but yeah, it's that's a really good point for people that are trying to start form any LLC or anything, open a business bank account. You're just going to get a million pieces of unwanted mail that are pretty much almost all illegitimate stuff, trying to get you to just send them money.
Exactly. They're going to try to get you to sign up for work posters for this, for that, domain stuff, marketing stuff. They use all the buzzwords that you hear, everybody
Yeah.
hears all the time. Like, oh, you got to do this, you got to do this. They use all the buzzwords, and you're just going to waste money, and you're never going to get anything out of them. But that's why it's good to have a network of people that you can call and say, hey, what's this? And they can tell you like, oh yeah, that's a scam, or no, wait, no, you have to pay that tax.
Yeah.
The franchise tax is a real thing.
Yeah.
You got to pay that.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's great. I think, mentorship has been such a big thing for me, in, I guess anything I've done, but it's same, kind of along the same lines of what you're talking about. It's just finding people. It doesn't, I don't mean necessarily paid mentors. You just listed off many different resources for people that would be free for them. It's just finding someone to talk to about what you're trying to do. And it's not to discourage, it's to understand the reality of what you're going to face. And it's not all going to be perfect, but there's ways to mitigate some of those challenges by having someone who's been through it and talking to them about it.
Yep.
So James, this was amazing. Thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing your story. I think listeners are going to love this episode. So thank you so much for taking the time out today.
Thank you for the invite. I really appreciate it and the opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. And folks listening, I know you're going to love this episode. Please like, rate, and review the show so we can get more great guests like James. And thank you all for listening.
Hey there, I am Dr. Jason Ballara, and this is the Know Your Why podcast, where we explore the why behind success. Every week, I meet with real estate investors, veterinary entrepreneurs, mindset coaches, authors, and fitness professionals to uncover their why and how it drives them on the winding road to success. What is your why?